Full disclosure, having driven the 2018 Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio once before, I genuinely thought it was going to simply dominate the BMW in this comparison. To my surprise, it didn't. The F80 BMW M3 Competition might be down 61 horsepower from the Alfa, but its rev-happy engine and spot-on chassis tuning made it feel just as sports car-like as the Italian. But that's not to say there aren't significant differences in the way these two sports sedans attack a twisted road. Let's explore what makes these cars more evenly matched than one might think, and find out which one I'd rather take home.
So this is the same 2018 Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio that I reviewed about a year ago. And the first time I reviewed this car, I concluded that it was one of the best sports sedans I've ever driven. It's powered by the 2.9-liter twin-turbo V6 Ferrari-derived engine, producing 505 horsepower, 443 foot-pounds of torque, driving the rear wheels through an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission. While I am a little disappointed that Alfa didn't sell the manual transmission option in the US, something about the way the ZF is tuned in this car actually works better than almost any other application of the same gearbox I've tried in other vehicles. So this car is heavier than the F80 M3, sitting in at around 3,800 pounds. But I promise you, if you ever are lucky enough to drive one of these on a canyon road, it really does hide its weight well. It has an extremely quick steering rack. It has adaptive dampers as standard. Right now we're in the dynamic mode, so we have improved throttle response, and the dampers are in the firm setting. It's either soft or firm. There's no middle setting here. And a lot has already been said about this car in my video and plenty of other videos out there, so I'm just gonna shut up for a moment and just enjoy this for a moment. This V6, it's making all the right sounds from the exhaust, crackles and pops. Oh my gosh, this car is so fast on the straights. 505 horsepower. That's no joke for a family sedan. Pirelli P0 Corsa tires makes this car have lots of front-end grip. This car is so good. It might even be better than the last time I drove it. Something about driving a car for the second time, I just feel a lot more comfortable in it, can start pushing it a little bit harder. We're also on a much better road this time around. This car really comes alive. The suspension is one of my favorite parts. Engine is amazing, transmission's amazing, steering ratio, very quick and darty, but the suspension is really impressive. In the soft mode, it's really nice and supple for daily driving and handles the bumps well. But you flip it over to the stiff mode, and actually you don't lose really much of that compliance. All you really feel is that the body roll, the body motions of the car when you're accelerating, braking, diving into corners, it all becomes a little bit tighter, a little bit more controlled without giving you that harshness that a lot of aftermarket suspensions give you. I think in a straight line, this Alfa should easily be a lot quicker than the F80 M3, even the competition M3 with its additional power. This car is one of the most powerful in its class. It's also one of the heavier options at 3,800 pounds, and yet it hides its weight so well. I think the fact that it has a quick steering ratio, and the fact that Alfa was bold enough to give it such an aggressive tire from the factory, this Corsa tire, it really just makes the car feel very, very just focused out of the box. This is a driver's car. Yes, it can haul, 5 adults, but that's really not the main intent of this car. Just got that almost Ferrari-like feel to it. The brake pedal is so confidence-inspiring. Very, very progressive feel. Now, if there's one thing I'm not a huge fan of, and this is totally personal preference, I wish the paddles were actually mounted on the steering wheel. I mean, Alfa is nice enough to give you a very large paddle, so it's pretty easy to place, but when you're steering in the hairpins, you do have to sort of move your hand a little bit to reach the paddle. In fact, I will say that as of now, this is the best sports sedan I've ever driven. So I'll be really curious to see if the F80 M3 Competition even comes close to this in driving dynamics. Both of these cars on the used market right now cost around 55 to 60 grand, depending on options and condition and mileage. And I think for that price, you're getting a ton of car with this Alfa. And it's unique, it's beautiful. The styling on the outside completely blows the M3 comps out of the water, in my opinion. It looks like nothing else on the road. And even the interior, it has such a focused Italian design. It's just way more in your face, I'll say that much, compared to the M3. The M3 has a very sort of serious, Teutonic, very German look to it. Good quality, but doesn't really stand out in any one way. I mean, just look at the steering wheel of this Alfa. This just screams Italian. And just like that, with a press of a button, we're back in the soft suspension mode. I'll flip it back into the automatic transmission. And the car suddenly becomes just supple, relaxed, quiet. Barely hear the engine at all. It keeps the revs relatively low. And it's just a perfectly comfortable daily driver. The two-sided nature of this car's personality is almost second to none, I would say. As a car that you can take to the racetrack, set some blistering lap times, and then drive home in pure comfort, I'm not sure I've driven a better car than this one. So the F80 M3 Competition has a lot on its plate. This Alfa is one of the most impressive cars, not just sports sedans, but cars I've driven, bar none. I've ranked it really, really high in my Zygrene Performance Index. I believe it's in the top 15 out of 125 plus cars I've ever driven. It's really that good. And that's saying something, because most of those cars in the top 15 are all manual transmission, but this ZF 8-speed, somehow they tuned it in this car to feel really, really responsive and good. I can't get over it. It feels better in this car than it does in the new 2021 Toyota Supra. So a big thank you to the owner of this Alfa again for letting me rip on it for a second time. So let's hop into the F80 M3 Competition and see how it stacks up. And just like that, we are now in the F80 M3 Competition, 2018 model, owned by my good friend Kevin. And I can already tell this is going to be a riot. The Alfa might have a little bit more flair to its design, a little more in your face, but this M3, it definitely means serious business. I can tell from the moment I hop in the car, everything's very driver focused. So what does the competition pack actually give you? Well, the three things that you should be worried about from an actual driving dynamics perspective is it gives you an extra 19 horsepower over the base M3, so 444 horsepower. That's still about 60 horsepower short of the Alfas, mind you. But the car also weighs only 3,500 pounds, or about 300 pounds lighter than the Alfa. The competition pack also gives you a recalibrated suspension. The base M3 comes with adaptive suspension already, but this one with the compact recalibrates it for more aggressive driving, and it also recalibrates the active rear M differential. So overall, not only do you get a little bit extra power, but it also should handle better than a non-comp M3. So 444 horsepower from its straight six 3-liter twin-turbo engine, sending all that power to the rear wheels through a 7-speed DCT dual-clutch transmission. Let's see how this competition pack M3 handles the twisties. We have it in a custom M mode right now that has everything on sport, sport steering, sport engine, the quickest transmission setting, and a firmer suspension setting as well. So it should be perfect for tackling this road here. Now, right away, these downshifts feel just that little bit snappier than the Alfa's 8-speed auto. Very responsive transmission. You really can't fault these BMW DCTs. So much grip, so much confidence. This car gives me every bit as much confidence diving into corners as the Alfa. Really solid brake pedal, lots of front end bite. The steering ratio is not nearly as quick as the Alfas, but the benefit of that is that it also gives you the ability to finally adjust your steering input a little bit easier. On the straights, it doesn't feel quite as rapid as the Alfa with that screaming 505 horsepower V6. But there's no question, this is a fast car. Really, really impressive car. Wow. You know, as good as that 8-speed auto is in the Alfa, this one is just a little bit more responsive. Now, similar to the Alfa is the torque curve of this engine. You do definitely get some turbo lag at low RPMs. You really got to wind this thing out above around 4 grand to get the most out of it. This chassis is just so good. Even in the firm suspension mode, the suspension's doing a great job at soaking up the bumps, really allowing me to tack corners with full confidence. Of course, these paddle shifters are mounted on the steering wheel itself, which I definitely prefer over the Alfa's column mounted setup. Lets me keep my hands on the wheel. Especially with the slower steering ratio, you want to be able to just know where the paddles are at all times. It's crazy that sports sedans, 3,500 plus pound sports sedans, have gotten this good. I mean, this isn't even the newest generation M3 anymore. The G80 is now at the top of everyone's minds. I'd love to drive one of those one day because this F80 comp is just blowing my mind right now. Both of these cars are so incredibly capable and fun to drive and confidence inspiring. When I'm behind the wheel, honestly, I forget that they're almost 2-ton sedans. I feel like I'm just in a rear-wheel drive sports car. Now, talking about the interior design a little bit, as I said, this is a much more serious German-looking interior. It doesn't have the flair of the Italian-designed Alfa, but it gets everything done very efficiently. The screen up here is a little bit small by today's standards, but so is the Alfa's. That's okay. Really nice, easy to read heads-up display. This one has a carbon trim on the inside. It's a nice place to be. From a daily drivability aspect though, I do have to give the nod to the Alfa. It does have more suspension compliance in its softest setting compared to the M3. Also, that 8-speed automatic, while it is just a tad less responsive than this DCT, because it is a torque converter, it also shifts a little bit smoother. The DCT at low speed as well as at high speed, you do feel a slight dip in torque whenever it shifts. That said, both these cars are so close, not only on paper, but also the way they drive. I am just completely blown away right now. If I had to take one of these home, it would honestly be a coin toss.
So it might just come down to a coin toss in driving dynamics, but that doesn't mean there isn't a car I'd rather drive home in. The F80 M3 Competition is a car that sacrifices very little. It snarls and bites when you want it to, but can also be comfortable and refined when you don't. On the other hand, the Alfa invokes a level of emotion from the driver that isn't quite matched by the better built but slightly stoic BMW. Maybe it's that Ferrari-derived V6, maybe it's the svelte exterior, maybe it's all down to the razor-sharp response from its thin-rimmed steering wheel. Whatever it is, it just works, and thus, the Giulia Quadrifoglio manages to just narrowly edge out the M3 Competition in my book.